Hello everybody and welcome to the third part of What If Naruto was banished and created his own village. I hope you enjoy this what if. Also don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to stay up to date with the latest episodes. Chapter 7 Seeds. Naruto stared up at the birds overhead, gliding on invisible currents of air. If only I had wings, we'd be back home in no time. He sighed and listened to the whisper of his bare feet on the sandy road. They'd left the crater that was the Kazemo clan's old home behind hours ago. The old man and children trudged on right behind Naruto, with Senji taking up the rear. Naruto really wished he had left something of the house, maybe then he could have gotten some shoes or something to wear. That last release of chakra he had released had completely destroyed his clothes. His tattered white clothes still hung on his back, his pants shredded below the knees, his shoes long gone. Senji scanned the forest they walked through carefully. He really doubted that any members of that guerrilla army remained after Naruto decimated them, but it didn't hurt to be careful. He thought back to when Naruto went berserk. It sure was a sight to behold. He didn't think anyone could stand up to that onslaught. The demon within him had certainly given him amazing levels of chakra. Senji had a question that was bothering him though. "Hey Naruto," he shouted to the front of their procession. Naruto turned around and walked backwards on the road so he could look at Senji with a quizzical eyebrow. "That last chakra blast, that wasn't your resident. It felt different." Senji asked carefully. The new clan didn't know as yet that Naruto had the QB inside him, and Senji thought it best for Naruto to explain that at a later time. Naruto looked thoughtful. "Honestly, it's all a bit of a blur. But..." He looked up at the sky. "I think I changed his chakra into my own, channeled it to mix with mine trying to suppress it. But it was too much to hold inside." Senji shook his head. "Hell of a thing to do by accident. That's a forbidden art if I ever saw one." Naruto grinned and put his hand behind his head. "Yeah, I guess it was pretty so." His words were cut short as he tripped over a rock in the road while walking backwards and landed on his ass. A small giggle escaped from one of the older girls. Naruto smiled at them then looked inquisitively to the old man. "Hey, we don't know any of your names." "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. That's my friend Senji." The patriarch stopped and pointed to everyone. "These are the twins Baku and Benika." He motioned to the youngest children, the most recent orphans who had just seen their parents murdered. He then pointed to the older boy and girl. "The boy is Junya, and the girl is Fuki. Also brother and sister. Twins are a clan trait." The old man smiled. "And I am Tora. Tora Kazemo." Naruto dusted himself off and looked for what seemed an eternity at the orphans. 1,000 thoughts went through Naruto's mind. Senji could see intense sadness cross his face to be replaced by quiet determination. "Nice to meet you guys properly. We'll be home in a couple days. We will protect the Kazemo clan with our last breath." Naruto's turned on his heel and walked forward. "You ready, Lee?" Shikamaru asked him in a whisper. The night air was brisk as the soft wind nipped at them. Ino peered around the building to the Hokage Tower. "The guards are switching any second now. So we have a total of 30 seconds tops before the next shift settles in for duty," she said. "More than enough," Lee said tensely. This was a mission and as such his usual bravado about flames of youth was tempered a bit. A solid month of harassing the hated Hokage Danzo had made them all somber. The trick was to harass the enemy, but not to inflict anything on the villagers. Shikamaru had come up with plan after plan to make life a living hell for Danzo. All so far had been successful. He grinned a little bit as he remembered the shouts coming from the Hokage Tower when Danzo discovered all the furniture in the entire tower had been turned to dust. Amazing what those bugs of Shino could do, eating that much wood in one night. "Now." Ino barked at them in a whisper. Lee looked up at the tower and disappeared in a blur, his ankle weights left in a heap by Shikamaru. Lee's speed was unmatched by any genin or chunin in Konoha, and Shikamaru estimated that no jounins would be watching the little window of opportunity they had scouted out. 5 seconds Lee's feet carried him at an amazing speed up the side of the Hokage Tower in leaps and bounds. He didn't have the chakra needed to stick his feet to the wall, but the sheer momentum he was moving at negated the need for it. 10 seconds. Lee was in the window of the Hokage's office window. A silent whoosh of air shifting the curtains was the only sign of his entry. He had studied the layout of the office before this mission, had even been in it a few times himself, so he knew exactly where to go. 15 seconds. He raced back out the window with the package in his hand. A leap from the window and he was a blur as he hit the ground running. One of the Chunin sentries who was just settling in could have sworn he saw a green blur across the courtyard, but it was gone as he blinked. 20 seconds. Lee rounded the corner back into the alley and stopped abruptly. 3 large figures stood there, and was the only sign of his entry. No. A familiar voice to Lee spoke firmly yet in barely a whisper. You will follow us right now before the guards hear us. Lee gulped and a trickle of sweat rolled down his temple. His grip tightened on the Hokage he had just stolen. Yes, Guy-sensei. He whispered back as they all disappeared into the shadows. Out of the way. Jiraiya shouted as he came up the river of wind. Truthfully, this was a very smart piece of advice he was giving, as a very large group of very large toads was behind him, each weighed down by packages of equipment and raw materials. Riding 2 of the toads were Tsunade and Inari, the builder and his grandson that Jiraiya had hired. They emerged into the cloud bank and Jiraiya directed each toad that landed to move quickly to the side so that the one behind didn't land on him. It became a very fast-paced game of leapfrog as the previous toad landed, hopped forward, then the other toad landed behind him, and hopped over him, and so on. Within minutes they were all settled and grouped around on the sand of the island itself. Inari and Tsunade stood next to the group and looked around. Their employer had not said much about where they were going, but that was to be expected if they were helping a hidden village. They just hadn't realized how hidden this one was. This is amazing, Tsunade said. In all my years, I would never think a place like this could exist. Jiraiya smiled. Well, the person who discovered it called it Tengaku, heaven, so Naruto decided to keep the name. Tsunade's and Inari's heads whipped around at the same time, the same word on both their lips. Naruto. As if on cue, a loud woohoo broke the calm and the white-clad ninja in question came bursting through the clouds, up the river of wind. He landed much better this time, in a crouched position, one hand touching the ground in front of him. Yes, he thought smugly, that was a perfect entrance. 1 second later, however, the 2 younger twins Baku and Benika fell on him. The rest of the Kazemo clan soon followed, everyone landing on top of Naruto, whose hands was all that showed. Within seconds they had untangled and were staring around at wonder at the island in the sky while Naruto grinned madly. But then Naruto and Senji saw the toads, Jiraiya, and a dumbstruck Tsunade and Inari staring at them. Naruto's mouth dropped open. Inari. A wide grin split Inari's face and he laughed and ran over to greet his friend. Later, around a campfire, they all took stock of where things stood. So Tsunade and Inari here will help build the water plants. When Guerrera gets back, we'll start on the main tower. The Kazemo clan is more than welcome to pitch in where you can. As you can see, we are starting from scratch. Old man Tora smiled. Thank you for inviting us here. I can see the potential in this village as a permanent home for my clan. In truth, we had nowhere else to go besides Konoha, and we've heard bad things lately about the new Hokage there. New Hokage. Naruto's attention now fully on Tora. Yes, an old warmonger named Danzo. A very long time ago, when the Tora clan fought in battles, we had heard of him. Some say he thought of his ninja as nothing more than pawns to win at all costs. A brutal reputation he had. I would not have willingly taken my family to Konoha now. Naruto's eyes grew dark and he put his head down. His old home in the hands of someone who stood completely against the old man, the only person Naruto thought of as Hokage, had once stood for. I've also heard of you, Naruto, Tora said with a weird tinge to his voice. Just a few weeks ago we heard of a town far from here that had been wiped out. Invading pirates had swarmed the city and one man in his anger at the raid waved his hand and destroyed the city and the pirates within. 1 city. They said his name was Naruto, a white-clad destroyer of cities, a Shinigami, an angel of death. They all grew quiet and the sound of the crackling embers was all the noise they heard. Jiraiya sensed his mood and decided a diversion was in order. So tomorrow we'll start the work of building this place. Tonight though, why don't you, he gestured to Inari, tell me how you know Naruto. Inari grinned and launched into a tale of how a trio of young ninja had saved their village and their lives. He embellished certain points to make it more grand, but he had everyone laughing and cheering as he reenacted the scenes of battle, most of which he had not seen, well into the night. You were reckless and stupid, and of course you would get caught eventually. Did you think you wouldn't? Shikamaru's dad tore into him verbally, lashing out with anger. Shikamaru, Ino, Lee, Chuji, Hinata, Ten, Neji, Kiba and Shino all stood there as their parents, with one exception, individually berated them in the room they had come to. Shikamaru hadn't been surprised at that point that the others had been rounded up at the same time. They had been discovered completely. Kakashi stood to the side and let the parents deal with their children for a few minutes. He stood guard over Hinata and Neji as they dared not inform the Hyuga clan of this. When he thought they'd gone far enough, he stepped forward. It is clear to us that you were seeking to harass the Hokage. Kakashi said loud enough to get everyone's attention. But then what? Shikamaru understood the question. The intention was to build up support against Danzo. To undermine his base. His father shook his head. The intentions are good, but all you've managed to do is make it seem like harmless pranks are being pulled on him. It is not enough. Shikamaru glanced quickly at his father at that last statement. That was more than beratement, that was disappointment in execution, not in their intention. What you are doing now, did you think that none of us in this room agreed with you? That Danzo is not to be trusted. Kakashi went on. The village is not at peace with the decision to make him Hokage. We cannot publicly agree with your actions, but privately, we will encourage and assist. Guy smiled at his student. Yash. The fires of youth burn brightly. Overthrowing a leader is a task best suited for this generation indeed. But come to me next time for advice, Lee. Guy-sensei, Lee hugged his mentor. The parents hugged their children. Kakashi turned to Hinata and Neji. Unfortunately, the Hyugas seem to be in full support of Danzo, so we cannot have your families involved. In fact, now would be a good time to back out for you too. No. Neji and Hinata said at the same time. Neji continued, our village is under threat. We must defend it. Kakashi nodded. Good. Now Danzo is the head of an underground organization called Root. And do you remember your D-class mission days? How do we remove an old root? Kiba snorted. We had to dig all around it then light it on fire before we could pull it out. Guy grinned. Exactly. Guerrera had arrived in the middle of the night with all his materials strapped to the back of a giant blue ox he had borrowed from a friend who could conjure such things. He had greeted the Tora clan warmly, and the Tora girls Benika and Fuki had immediately taken to fawning over his daughter. Naruto and Senji stood at the place the future tower of their city would stand. They had cleared out the area and readied it for construction before their little adventure. Naruto had gotten a new pair of white trousers and sandals. Jiraiya had explained to him that if he wanted to start a new village, his reputation was tantamount. So wearing orange was out. Naruto had pouted at that, but gladly put on the trousers and sandals that were thrown at his face by Jiraiya. The shirt lay cast aside for now, as they were about to do some serious manual labor. Okay. Naruto shouted and formed the signals. 50 shadow clones appeared, all ready to begin laying stones. Senji grinned. Naruto's almost unlimited clone-making abilities would help them build this tower in no time. Guerrera approached them with the blueprints he had drawn up. For the first time, Naruto got a good look at the design. It was a solid, smooth round white tower extending 150 feet into the air. From what Naruto could tell in the notes, the windows would be frosted glass with intricate seals and markings to prevent cracking or breaking. The roof of the tower would house what Guerrera only marked as beacon light. Naruto didn't know what that was, so didn't think about it much for the moment. Senji whistled as he too looked at the plans. Wow. That's beautiful. Really going with the whole heavenly theme, huh? He smiled. Okay, Guerrera, what do we do first? Tsunade and Inari began unpacking the pipes that Jiraiya had brought. The toads long gone, the packs lay around the lake that was to be the main water source. "You know, Grandpa," Inari said as he hefted some nuts and bolts, "I was thinking maybe when we finish this job, we can stick around here for a while." He glanced over at Tsunade cautiously. "Maybe I could learn to be a fighter like Naruto even." Tsunade didn't look over at Inari. "Why would you want to fight?" Inari looked out over the lake and the sky. "To protect people who can't protect themselves, like Naruto does." Tsunade grunted and passed a rope to Inari. "Do what you wish, grandson. After we finish this job." Naruto and Senji had begun by creating a pulley system to put the large metal beams that would be the frame of the structure into the ground. Guerrera supervised it all such that by the end of the first day, they had the first of the beams in and the holes for the others already dug. An exhausted Naruto sank to the ground around the campfire. Even with shadow clones, it was a lot of work. This tower wouldn't just appear overnight. He had underestimated how much work it would be. But at the same time, he lay back with a satisfied grin on his face. He was building his own home with his own hands. Jiraiya noticed the smile on Naruto's face and recognized it for what it was. He smiled too, proud of his student. "Okay," he called everyone's attention. "We have a few things to talk about." Tora stirred the pot of stew he was making for everyone to eat, but he gave Jiraiya his attention. The Kazumi children were playing with Gabriel, Senji was sharpening his blades. Guerrera just sat with a content face and looked on. "Our village name is Tengaku, and Naruto here would like for it to be a powerful village capable of taking in people and protecting them. Do I have that right, Naruto?" Naruto nodded, so Jiraiya continued. "Well then we need to organize a few things. The village itself is being built, but Noon knows about us. The very first thing we need is a symbol. Something to represent the ideals of our village. Suggestions?" Naruto sat up, he hadn't thought of that. What would they put on their headbands? He scowled. He didn't particularly want to wear another headband. It had been months since he lost his Konoha one, and even though he had his own village now, he didn't feel right putting on another one. But the band could wait, for now. "Well, what would represent heaven?" Naruto asked. Tora walked over and sat down. "We are currently in the land with no name, 100 miles west of the last great country. Our village is hidden in the heavens, the heavenly city." Senji chimed in, "We could use the pearly gates, but that just seems wrong." A voice came in from the shadows, "I say we put wings on our crest. As we are the warriors of heaven. I think archangels is a good imagery to put out there." Tenchi stepped into the light of the campfire smiling. They all welcomed him back. Jiraiya laughing at his entry. "Damn samurai, do you have to be so mysterious?" He cocked his head to the side. "I like the idea though. The warriors of heaven. Naruto." Naruto grinned madly. "Well, if I'm already getting to be known as an angel of death, it makes sense." "So we're archangels?" he asked Tenchi. "Archangels," he corrected Naruto. "The warriors of heaven." Naruto felt a chill. "I love it." Jiraiya nodded and made a note in his little book. "Okay, that settles that. So we have a name for our warriors, and a symbol. I'll design something and show you when I'm done." Now the next step. We already have one clan adopted to our village, the Kazumi clan. What do we do about training? Old man Tora shook his head. "I will not force my grandchildren to a life of being warriors. They can make the decision on their own. I myself fought in wars and it's not a pleasant thing." The Kazumi kids grew quiet. The oldest boy, Junya, looked down. "I'd like to learn to fight. Our parents were killed, and Baku and Benika's as well. And the way those men were torturing and playing with my sister. I need to get stronger to protect them." Inari had tears in his eyes, hearing familiar words. "I too would like to learn how to fight," after glancing to his grandfather, though he added, "after we finish our job, of course. I'd like to stay here." Naruto stood up, tears in eyes too. "I'd be happy if you stayed, Inari. You too, Tazuna. Junya, I'll make sure you can protect your sister and your family. Tora sighed. Since I'm not much other use, I'll begin instruction on the children who want to learn. If Junya is doing it, then so is Fuki. Fuki nodded shyly. I will set aside an area tomorrow for a warrior academy. Since we have people from all over the known world, I think I'd like to suggest we don't only study ninja arts. We already have samurai, ninja, and a luchador. Naruto nodded. I think that makes sense. But then he looked puzzled. What's a luchador? Guerrera, Jiraiya, and Tenchi laughed. Naruto, you really should learn about your opponents before you fight them. Guerrera is a luchador. A masked wrestler or grappler. It's a strong one-on-one fighting style. Tenchi said. Oh, Naruto laughed. That's okay then. So we aren't training ninjas, we're training warriors. Warrior angels. They laughed and settled into more casual talk for the rest of the evening. Gaara entered the village of Konoha followed by his entourage of 30 visible ninja. The Hokage had requested this meeting months ago, but Gaara was new in his post as Kazekage and couldn't leave so early in his tenure. In truth, he didn't even want to come here, the village that had scorned his one friend Naruto, but in his official capacity he had to put aside those issues. He just hoped he could maintain his calm around Danzo. Fortunately, or unfortunately, his visit coincided with another diplomat. The daimyo himself. The Fire Lord and his train of courtesans and bodyguards easily took up the entire street. Gaara scowled as he fell in line behind the daimyo as tradition dictated he did. Danzo stared down at them from his balcony, his eyes wide. He had no prior knowledge of the arrival of either party. The usual courtesies hadn't been prepared. He called on his trusted aides, remnants of his root organization. What's the meaning of this? Did you know? He demanded of his first officer. No sir, no message was received informing us. Danzo swore vehemently. He raced down the stairs to greet the arriving diplomats and Gaara the Kazekage he had wanted to meet alone. His carefully crafted assassination plot to kill Gaara was out the door now, he couldn't do anything with the daimyo here. He flung open the doors to the Hokage tower just as the daimyo stopped short of it. Greetings, Your Eminence. I wasn't aware you were coming. He gritted out behind the widest smile he could muster. Gaara watched him curiously from next to the daimyo. I see the usual manners of your predecessor have been forgotten. The daimyo said irritably. My feet haven't touched dirt floor in some time. I shall be sure to remember this experience, Hokage. Where is your hat? Danzo cursed mentally, the red carpet hadn't been rolled out. He didn't notice as the guard next to him eyes glazed over for the briefest of seconds, but enough to stumble forward and push Danzo from behind. Danzo wasn't expecting it and fell helplessly into the daimyo. The both of them tumbled down the stairs of the Hokage tower. Gaara looked on in shock while his advisor and Sensei Baki looked across the courtyard to the rooftop of a nearby shop where Ina and her father stood looking down on the proceedings. Truthfully, all the rooftops had families watching the great Fire Lord's entrance. So his tumble with Danzo brought an audible gasp from the crowd. Inoichi Yamanaka very subtly winked at his daughter, having just re-entered his body. Ino smiled at her dad and looked back at the flailing arms and dust spectacle before them. It was going to be an interesting visit by the daimyo. By the third day, Naruto was working alongside 150 clones of himself. They were evenly divided building the tower, the water plant and the wind turbines. He had also thrown a few into training. As he realized he remembered everything they learned, it just felt wrong to forget about training just because he was busy with his village. Jiraiya had come up with a symbol for their village. A pair of sharp angular wings cut out of the metal background of the headband. Naruto loved it. Naruto was thinking though about something Senji had said the night before. Senji, he asked as he handed him another large brick. Do you remember last night, where you said I should be careful I don't fall off the island again and float away to the sea or something? Senji scowled, the sun was blazing them today. Yes, I remember. Why? Naruto grinned. He made the familiar hand signs and pumped out another 50 clones. Okay, let's do this, he shouted at them. The clones all ran off in different directions. What are you doing? Senji asked. Simple, Naruto smiled as he went back to work. I remember everything when my clones dissipate. So I'll send each one to find another path of wind off and back on the island. And I'll keep doing it till we have it all mapped out. Senji laughed. Good idea, Naruto. Maybe next trip we take, we don't have to walk back. One particular Naruto clone was flying faster than he thought possible as an extremely fast stream of wind had him hurtling fast through the atmosphere eastwards. For what felt like a little more than an hour he zoomed past clouds high above the ground. He felt the excitement and rush of flying and really wished he could learn to do this without streams. He felt the stream start to weaken. And he thought it would be a slow descent like before. But this time, he suddenly was let go, the stream too weak to carry him anymore. He screamed as he fell to earth. As he broke the cloud bank he saw a village directly beneath him, a village that looked all too familiar. The village elders looked in disgust at Danzo as he apologized to the Daimyo profusely, helping him back up. The Daimyo was incensed. I do not think I will stay here any further, I've suffered enough embarrassment at the hands of your hospitality. He turned to go when they heard a growing scream. They looked up just in time to see a half-naked boy. The clone was just wearing white pants, with yellow hair hit both of them at full force from a height of hundreds of feet. The clone was instantly dissipated in a puff of smoke. Danzo and the Daimyo lay unconscious in the street. Kakashi whistled low from a nearby rooftop. Okay, that I did not expect. Chapter 8 The Magnificent Mabry. The toad on her bed disappeared in a puff of smoke, its message delivered. Tsunade smiled incredulously and let tears form in her eyes. The boy was safe. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and flung on her robe. It was early, the sun had just come up, but she knew where her newest apprentice would be. As she walked out of the modest hut settled in the hills of the Fire Country, she heard the sounds of Sakura practicing. She stood at the doorway to watch for a few seconds. Sakura was oblivious to Tsunade's presence. She cocked her hands to her sides in the traditional horse stance and prepared her chakra. She felt it swelling to her fists and she unleashed her right fist into the large boulder that eclipsed her. It hit with a solid humph. Dust and rubble flew from the point of impact, leaving a hole much larger than the impact her fist should have made. Ever since Tsunade had shown her the secret of the Furi no Kiwami, she'd been practicing it. Days, weeks, months had gone by. She concentrated on the process again in her head. Basically a double impact hit. The first punch with the proximal interphalangeal joint neutralizes the hardness of the target, then the second blow, struck with the proximal phalanx, breaks the target before it recovers from the force of the first blow. Of course this all needed to be done in milliseconds so that to the naked or even trained eye, it looks like one hit. She released her breath and hit with the left fist this time. A similar puff of dust and pebbles erupted out of the boulder. Sakura allowed herself a small smile. She was getting there. She was getting stronger. Sakura. Tsunade called out to her. Come over here, I have something to tell you. Jiraiya landed with a thump in Tengaku, the river of wind getting no easier for the Sannin to traverse. He grumbled as he picked himself up and looked back the way he came. I need to do something about making that entrance easier. And more secure too. He hefted the bag on his shoulder and walked over to where he could see the tower being built in the distance. The steel beams that framed the structure were all up. The first floor had been completed and work was moving ahead briskly on the second. Even with all of Naruto's clones, this was as far as they'd gotten in 2 months. Well, to be fair, they had needed to split the clones amongst the water plant, the wind turbines and the tower construction. Still, the tower was beginning to look impressive. Massive white stone walls lined the first floor, an intricate design was laid into the floor which Jiraiya could have sworn was marble. Guerrero was really a genius with his hands. It was in here that they all slept now, sleeping bags scattered over to one side of the massive room. The second floor was supposed to have bedrooms for them all, even if they would have to share the one bathroom they had planned for that floor. Jiraiya grinned, they had all been so excited at the prospect of indoor plumbing once again. Hey! He called out to one of the busy Naruto clones. Where's the real one and everyone else? The clone stopped and lowered the tools in his hands. Jiraiya noticed that as usual, Naruto was bareback. But this time he saw that he had grown in height a little bit, and that his muscles had gotten harder and bigger. All the manual labor was really paying off in strengthening his body, and that was translating into his clones. Well, Naruto and Senji took a break, so they went to train down at the grounds. Tenchi and a bunch of us clones are running underground cables for the electricity, and Tsunade and Inari are running pipelines for the water plant into the tower. We're all really excited about being able to shower soon. With that, Naruto picked up his tools and joined back in the work on the second floor. Jiraiya turned on his heels and headed down to where Naruto and Senji would be training. They had come to call it the training grounds, but it was really just a large flat meadow right outside of where they had mapped out the village they were building would be. Before he arrived, he heard the sounds of the training through the trees. "Ready, Naruto?" Senji's voice called out loudly. "Let her rip." Naruto's voice then called out. Second later, Jiraiya heard a whistle as something flew through the air, after which a loud boom resonated through the meadow. He walked into the meadow and saw Naruto at one side, palms facing forward. Senji stood at the other side of the meadow laughing. "Good block, Naruto. Ready?" he asked again. Jiraiya watched in interest. Senji grasped his blades and in one swift move sliced towards Naruto, causing a slash of energy and air to hurl towards him. The Sannin was alarmed until he saw Naruto grin and calmly push his palms forward and release a counter barrier of chakra and air. The two collided with an explosive force that had wind whipping at Jiraiya's face. Those two are either going to kill each other, or going to be the strongest warriors in the world. Jiraiya frowned, honestly not knowing which option it would be. "Hey brat!" Jiraiya called out. Naruto and Senji waved at Jiraiya and walked over. "That wind affinity is really coming along, isn't it?" he said matter-of-factly. Naruto nodded. "Yeah. It's getting easier to convert my chakra to wind. I can almost feel the wind around me too. I don't know if it's because of where we are, in the windy place, but I can swear I'm almost feeling it all over me all the time." Jiraiya frowned. If Naruto was beginning to feel the air, it wouldn't be long before he started to feel the chakra all around him. This sort of development was too fast. He hadn't made any arrangements to begin sage training. He might need to step up his schedule to prevent his prized pupil from turning into a frog statue. "Keep practicing, boys." Jiraiya turned to go. "I'll talk to you tonight." He walked off, determined to have a talk with Toad very, very soon. That night, as they sat around a small fireplace in the ground floor of the tower, Jiraiya relayed news to them. "Okay, so I've begun spreading rumors of Tengaku. My spy network is in full effect, looking for any clans who are in need of protection and somewhere to go." Everyone greeted this with nods of approval. Ever since they had come here, they had been discussing the purpose of the village. And Naruto was most insistent that they protect the innocent, and shield those who needed it. He very much remembered what it was like to be persecuted and hated. "I've also gotten in touch with Tsunade. She will be joining us with her apprentices soon." He looked curiously at Naruto. "Naruto, one of her apprentices is Sakura. After you were banished, Sakura abandoned Konoha and begged Tsunade to train her." Naruto was startled. He had thought of his friends back in Konoha often, but not once did he think he'd be seeing one again so soon. He couldn't help but smile at that. "So I've asked Tsunade to get in touch with someone I've used many times. She's far closer to his last location than I am." "Who's that?" Tenchi asked curiously. The fire crackled as Senji fed it another stick. Jiraiya chuckled softly. "Why, the magnificent Mabry, that's who." Tenchi groaned and Naruto gasped. "I remember him." Naruto smiled widely. "He had done a free magic show for us when we were at the orphanage. He was great." Tenchi sighed. "Yes, Mabry." He groaned again to himself. Naruto was explaining to Senji and Inari how this lady was sawed in half, then her feet began kicking in the box. That charlatan would indeed be useful. Naruto stopped his animated description and turned back to the discussion. "How is a magician going to help us?" He glanced at the Kazumo clan and wondered if maybe a magic show to raise spirits was what Jiraiya had planned. "Mabry is a find-it man," Jiraiya explained. "Anything you need, no matter how rare it is, he can find it and supply it. I want to use him to set up supply lines for Tengaku. Food, medicine, clothing. Basic necessities as well as anything special we may need. Oh. Naruto nodded in understanding. Moving on, I stopped in Gatai village and had these made up. He tossed the first thing he pulled out of his bag at Naruto, who caught it effortlessly. It was a head protector with the symbol of Tengaku on it. Naruto held it tightly, 100 emotions going through him. He remembered the feeling when his own headband was denied him after being banished. The feeling he had when Irika had given him his headband personally. It felt wrong to put on a headband to replace the Konoha one. He looked up at everyone watching him. Naruto steeled his face and tied the band to his left arm, symbol facing out. They all seemed to understand, as Jiraiya passed them around, Senji, Tenchi, Guerrera, Tora Kazumo. They all put on the bands on their left arm instead of their foreheads. The Kazemo children looked like they wanted the symbol themselves. But old man Tora explained to them how it was a symbol that only qualified warriors should wear. After they finish his basic training, they could get bands of their own. Naruto smiled, remembering his own eagerness to earn the Konoha leaf headband. The pride he felt when he earned it was so tangible. Jiraiya smiled at the small family and how they supported Naruto. He slipped one more band out of the bag and tied it to his own arm. Good, we are now officially archangels, he said tongue-in-cheek. They all laughed. Old man Tora though stopped and asked a question. Wait, speaking of that, do we want Tengaku to be recognized officially as a hidden ninja village by the other villages? They all went silent as they thought about that. Naruto hadn't thought about it at all. I'd say, Jiraiya spoke first, that eventually we would want that, but we're a good few years away from that being possible. We should focus on building a strong village first, before we try to approach the other villages for recognition. We do need to build our reputation though. Reputation? Naruto asked. Senji explained it to him. Our village is unknown, so we won't get jobs that hidden villages get normally. Protection jobs, assassinations, the normal stuff. Like what we were doing before, you and I, as freelancers. Jiraiya nodded. Yes, building the structures is important work, but so is building the reputation of our warriors. My spy network is already whispering the name Tengaku, but we need displays of prowess. Tenchi looked at the younger warriors seriously. That means that you Naruto and you Senji must take some more jobs and execute them flawlessly. I think one job per month, so that you can split your time between here, building the village, and outside, building the name. Either I, or Jiraiya will arrange these jobs for you. I think we can scrounge up work with our contacts. He looked at Jiraiya, who grinned in approval and held up one finger. Good, that's settled. You will leave on your first mission in a week's time. In a deep cave far away in the land of sound, a sallow face split into a large grin as he stalked the hall, slithering his way to the dimly lit room where his newest apprentice was practicing. A dark chuckle escaped his thin pale lips as he saw the progress the young one was making with the help of the cursed seal and a few other minor adjustments he and Kabuto were doing to him. The news he had just heard would add fuel to an already promising fire. Sasuke, he said, barely audibly. We have heard a rumor of your old teammate, Naruto. The voice trailed out into a fit of otherworldly giggles. Sasuke grumbled. What do I care? He continued to swing his katana at the practice post. Orochimaru grinned. The rumor is he single-handedly wiped out an entire city filled with marauding pirates in his anger. That his anger was so righteous, that he smote them into oblivion with a wave of his hand. He giggled madly again. I guess you have a long way to go to catch up to him. He watched intently as the emotions played across Sasuke's face. Shock, disbelief, jealousy, anger, and finally resolve. Sasuke tackled the post harder with the next swing, and the next, and the next. Orochimaru chuckled to himself and closed the door to the training room. Jiraiya eyed the entrance to the wind tunnel. Securing this entryway was a high priority, but a task he was loath to do. It would require countless hours of seal making to get his idea just right, and he was no seal master. This would have to be temporary. He sat down determinedly, and began to sketch out the first array of seals. Just then, a shadow fell across him and a familiar voice greeted him. Senji hefted the next large square stone onto his shoulders and took the steps to where it needed to go. He deposited it shortly thereafter on the pulley system they had rigged up. With a sigh of relief as the weight was no longer on his back, he wiped the sweat from his brow and looked up. The sun was blazing down on them. He knew it was all in his mind, but he could have sworn that they were remarkably close to the sun, being this high up in the sky, as it mercilessly beat down upon them. Suddenly he felt a presence coming at him from behind. He bent at the waist backwards just as the sound of a whip cracked where his head was a second ago. He twisted and landed on all fours, drawing his knees to his chest and springing forward towards his assailant. He didn't recognize who the intruder was, a warrior who had a long red scarf around his neck, oddly shaped robes tucked into double-toed soft shoes. The whip that had come close to hitting him was no whip, but the scarf itself. There was something familiar about the enemy. Senji's lunge was blocked by a raised leg and the unknown warrior settled into a pose holding the scarf that Senji recognized immediately. He rolled in the dust and sprang back up. Shit. Kair Kengeki. His swords were far away, so this was going to be a hard fight, however he had no intention of fighting back. His recognition of the fighting style led to his realization of his attacker. Hiroka. He whispered under his breath as his attacker whipped the scarf towards him. It moved impossibly fast. Senji could have sworn the material stretched beyond what it should have been able to. He ducked under it only to see it fold down and come after him. He spun out of the way, whirling his legs around to land on his back a yard to the left. He knew that the Kair Kengeki user infused chi, or as Naruto called it chakra, into their weapon, which was always a form of cloth. Harmless looking, yet deadly. The edge of the impossibly long scarf sliced into the ground where he lay seconds earlier, leaving a large cut in the earth. Senji let a drop of sweat fall from his forehead. If that had hit him. Hey, what are you doing? A Naruto clone shouted at the attacker. 3 other clones came around the building then and saw what was going on. The attacker cursed and lashed out with the scarf. It billowed out, unfolding like a sail. As the Naruto clones charged, the scarf split into sections, each one impaling a clone in the arm, legs. Not a deadly wound if it was a person, but enough to make them erupt into puffs of smoke because they were clones. The intruder turned back to Senji who had gotten up, but hadn't attacked. Listen Hiroka, he started to say. The tail end of the scarf hit him in the midsection, knocking the wind out of him. He flew backwards, looking on helplessly as strips of cloth snaked their way around him, binding his arms and legs. He hit the dirt trussed up like a turkey, the attacker jumping impossibly high into the air, other strips of cloth billowing behind her. She looked like a winged demon with the cloth forming wings behind her as she twisted and turned, to plummet heel first towards Senji's tied-up form. He rolled to the side just barely enough for her foot to graze his forehead but not crush it. It was enough however to knock him unconscious. The attacker stood proudly over Senji bending down to grasp his face. 15 Naruto clones exploded into the attacker, tackling her to the ground. When at least 2 Narutos were holding arms, legs, head, pinning the attacker to the dirt, only then did Naruto ask. What the hell is going on? Naruto ripped the mask off the intruder, to find a beautiful Chinese girl, probably 18 or 19 years old, muttering curses at him and spitting. Dai Lumaozi. She writhed against the restraints of Naruto's hands. Chao and Ainyang. A long string of words that Naruto did not understand, but got the general idea were not very nice followed. Jiraiya and Tenchi walked into the clearing, laughing. Tenchi walked up to the struggling attacker. Such bad language. His face stern. Behave yourself, daughter. Tsunade, Shizune, and Sakura entered the town to the sound of carnival music filtering its way down to them. The townspeople all looked jovial and excited. Tsunade scowled. We're in the right place. She motioned to the center of the small town where a large brightly colored wagon towered above the gathered crowd. In front of the wagon was a tall gangly man, garishly dressed in a bright turquoise top hat with a matching jacket. His waistcoat was the color of gold, gleaming in the midday sun. The only thing that could have been any brighter was the smile on his face, teeth gleaming at the gathered crowd. Ladies and gentlemen. This is not a trick. This is. His fingers flash and a large bouquet of flowers appears in his hand. Magic. The crowd claps appreciatively, children laughing at the display. Sakura turned to look at Tsunade, confused. Did he just do a summoning jutsu in his hands without blood? Sakura asked. Tsunade shook her head in disgust. No. Mabry doesn't know any jutsus, or have any chakra capacity or control. He's just a sleight-of-hand artist. The best you're ever likely to see. He's also the best supplier in the named world. They sat down to watch the show as Mabry flourished pigeons, blew fire, levitated a child from the crowd, and sawed his assistant in half. The crowd ate it up. Sakura marveled at the showmanship of the magician. He had them eating out of his hands. They cheered, laughed, and called for more when the show was finally over. He thanked them all and went behind the curtain into his massive wagon. Tsunade and Shizun got up, so Sakura followed suit. They walked through the happy dispersing crowd to the curtains. A very large woman blocked their path. She sported short bristled blonde hair, tattoos up down both arms, and one eyebrow that extended over both eyes. She was indeed a fearsome-looking creature. Tsunade walked right up to her face. There was an instant of recognition on the bodyguard's face. Mistress Tsunade. There was a question in her voice. Sakura saw a flash of fear, then a look of resolve. You cannot go in. Mr. Mabry specifically told me if I ever saw you again. The bodyguard had no time to finish the sentence because Tsunade had grabbed the front of her shirt and lifted, then threw her to the side, sailing into a nearby water fountain. Tsunade, Shizun, and Sakura walked through the curtains into the wagon of the magnificent Mabry. He sat at a simple wooden table, drinking what Sakura guessed was scotch, looking all the while like he was waiting for Tsunade. He flashed her a half-hearted smile and poured himself another drink. I saw you in the back of the crowd earlier. Thanks for not disrupting the show. The kids were really enjoying it. His voice was somber and not at all like the personality on display outside. So how many did you find this time? Tsunade asked, sitting down opposite him at the table. The creak of the wooden chairs competing with the tinkle of nearby chimes for the only sound in the room. 13 homeless children. 5 severely beaten. My boys are out looking for the runner now. He said, anger clear in his voice. Sakura looked baffled between Mabry and Tsunade. They clearly knew each other. Tsunade saw Sakura's puzzled expressions and sighed. Mabry here runs a home for homeless children. He takes exceptionally good care of them, raising any child from infancy until he's ready to leave or stay behind and help out. Most chose to stay. He's been doing this for, what? 20 years. He cleared his throat. 22 actually. He turned to look at Sakura. See, I was an orphan myself. I had to endure beatings and being on the street. Then I was taken in by who I thought was a kind man. He was a child runner. They sell children into slavery, prostitution, begging. It's a cruel, torturous life for a child. Realization washed over Sakura. So you travel from town to town looking for children to save? Her face cracked a wide smile of genuine affection. You're a really nice man. He shook his head in disgust. No. No, I'm not. At that moment 2 younger men came bursting into the wagon, throwing a greasy-looking man onto the floor at the feet of Mabry. He looked down at the sniveling man dressed in what looked like hand-me-down finery. A whip lay curled at his belt. Mabry's eyes narrowed and he gave a sharp intake of breath. He grabbed the man by his throat and lifted him to his feet. You use that whip on the kids you enslave? He asked at barely a whisper. Sakura watched as the child runner pissed himself. I guess facing an adult is a lot scarier than facing a child. She turned to ask Tsunade a question when the sharp crack of a slap rang through the room. Mabry had backhanded the man across his face. The blow left a large red welt on the man's face. The man reached for his whip. Sakura was about to intervene when Tsunade grabbed her wrist. She shook her head at Sakura, signaling to let Mabry deal with it. Mabry lifted the man even higher with his one hand on his throat. The child runner's feet no longer touched the wooden floor of the wagon room. Dax, Kino. He called out to the two young men who dragged the man inside. Make sure that the children he beat up see his corpse on the nearest tree. With that he snapped the man's neck with his one hand and flung the body to the two men. They quickly picked it up and left the tent. Mabry stalked back to the table and drank the rest of his scotch. So to what do I owe the pleasure of your visit, my lady Tsunade? He said with a small bow. Tsunade cleared her throat. We have a proposition for you. Mabry took his hat off and put it on a rack. We. Jiraiya and I. She continued. And his apprentice, Naruto. Mabry stiffened. Naruto. Jiraiya. Is this Naruto from Konoha? Sakura was startled. You know Naruto? Mabry cursed under his breath. 7 years ago I tried to take Naruto away from Konoha. He was beaten up, neglected. He would have done well away from such a bad environment. But the Hokage stopped me himself. Said Naruto was too valuable to the village and had to remain. We got into an actual fight over it. He took off his shirt. A long white scar ran diagonally across his chest. That's how I got this scar. The old goat was better than I thought. Sakura didn't know what else to say. This man had fought the Hokage, over the well-being of Naruto, a then-child who he hadn't known anything about beyond being neglected. So what's the proposal? He asked as he pulled out another shirt from a cabinet and began to put it on. Tsunade smiled. We'd like you to set up a supply line to heaven. Senji woke up several hours later. Night had fallen and they were all talking and laughing with the young lady who had intruded on their camp earlier. He sat up, rubbing his temple. Ow, Hiroka, he grimaced. Why do you have to play so rough? The girl in question threw a look his way. I had to make sure my ex-fiancé hadn't gotten weak. Naruto sighed audibly. He didn't understand exactly what was going on, no one was telling him anything. Senji sulked off into the darkness to wash the blood off his face. Naruto followed him to make sure he was all right. He caught up to him by the edge of the lake. So, your ex-fiancé, huh? Naruto asked awkwardly, grinning like an idiot and rubbing the back of his head. Senji grumbled and splashed the water on his face. Yeah. Tenchi's daughter. He bent down to the lake again and cupped his hands in the moonlight. The only woman I've ever loved and will ever love. And I can never marry her. Senji said with a finality that left no room for more questions. Naruto didn't ask, just sat with his friend as they stared up at the moon, which seemed impossibly close. Mabry cracked his whip over the 4 gigantic donkeys pulling his wagon. He waved down to Tsunade, Sakura, and Shizune. Remember our deal, Tsunade. You hold up your end, and I'll do my part. He grinned and took off his hat, waving it to the crowd of people cheering as he slowly drove off. The townsfolk only saw a great entertainer. Shizune scowled and looked at Tsunade. Why would you agree to that? How are we going to manage that? She asked incredulously. Sakura agreed, it seemed like an almost impossible task all things considered. Tsunade shook her head. It will be fine. Step 1, we find Mabry's orphanage using the map he gave us. Step 2, we transport the entire building to Ten's Hikage, as well as every boy, girl, and baby in the place. How hard can that be? She asked with a glint in her eyes. Why, I bet we can make it in 1 week. Konoha. Shino leaned against the door nodding his head as Ino spoke to him. To anyone passing, it was just 2 teammates chatting in the evening after a day of missions. A more wary and observant eye may have noticed that neither seemed completely at ease. Or they may have noticed that Shino had several bugs scattered in a block radius. The 2 teens were standing guard over that night's meeting of Naruto's army. Ever since the debacle that was the Daimyo's visit, the village had been a powder keg, just waiting to explode. Citizens and ninja alike were embarrassed by their Hokage Danzo. He had brought much shame to Konoha. Danzo himself had gone on a rampage looking for the source of his harassment, blaming Naruto's army for it all. The demon sympathizers would be captured and punished. Even Naruto's army had no idea how it had happened, but the Kage Bunshin that hit the Daimyo and Danzo did look like Naruto. And that was Naruto's favorite jutsu. But public opinion had turned. Danzo had no support for the common populace. He was now ruling with an iron fist, all semblance of democracy was slowly being peeled away. The council themselves were due to meet to discuss the situation. The general feeling and rumor was that they were going to remove Danzo. Inside the meeting room, Kakashi had his Sharingan exposed. In case anyone got past the guards outside, he would immediately notice anything out of the ordinary. Tonight, the clan heads and the village elders will vote on Danzo's leadership abilities. Shinomura announced to the gathered Genin, Chunin, and Jounin. I have it on good advice that the Hyugas are withdrawing their support for Danzo. They are one clan that does not handle embarrassment well. Hinata nodded at that statement. She had overheard similar discussions, very heated ones, at her clan home. Danzo would be aware of this, and has to be planning something. He's a very smart political animal. Kakashi nodded. Just then his Sharingan eye picked up on Lee arriving outside and saw as both Lee and Ino ran through the doors into the room. Ino panted as she let the words spill out. The village elders have been assassinated. Danzo has declared martial law. The ANBU are looking for the murderer Hatake Kakashi. Chapter 9. The Inquisition. Naruto strapped on his white sandals. He had finally gotten over his orange fetish and accepted that as a warrior of Tengaku he would wear white. The straps on the sandals snapped into place. He straightened up and ran his fingers through his hair. It had been almost 8 months since he'd left Konoha and he hadn't had a haircut since. His spiky blonde hair was longer now, bushier, spikier if that was possibly. Naruto looked at himself in the mirror, one of the many supplies brought back in their material expeditions. He didn't look 13, well at least he didn't think so. His body had started to harden up from all the manual labor. He had grown a few inches as well. It was certainly not the same Naruto who left Konoha with nowhere to go that stared back at him from the mirror. Naruto sighed and put on his white jacket over the white vest he had on. He left it unzipped and pushed the Tengaku armband up his left arm, tying it securely above his left bicep. He didn't bother with a shuriken holster since he'd learned how to make senbon out of wind. He had an unlimited supply as long as he had chakra, and let's face it, he thought to himself, the one thing I have loads of is chakra. Naruto grabbed a Largo bow staff he had gotten from Tenchi a few days ago. Don't go getting this one broken too, Naruto. Tenchi had warned him. It takes me a lot of time and effort to carve these to have the perfect balance and weight. I won't be making you another anytime soon. He took it to heart. Of course Tenchi failed to mention that standing not 10 feet away was Guerrera, who was chuckling to himself, remembering when he broke Naruto's staff. Naruto spun the bow around him, twirling it and then bringing it to a sudden stop with a thump to his right, the base of one end landing perfectly on the ground. Ready. He strode outside of the temporary room that he had chosen on the completed second floor of the tower. He nodded to some of his clones as he walked past them. He hoped his clones would last until he came back from this mission. There was still so much work to be done to prepare this village. He walked down the stairs to the ground floor where Jiraiya and Tenchi were waiting for him. He looked around but didn't see Senji anywhere. His new friend had been slightly different since Hiroka had shown up, more serious, less outgoing. It was to Naruto as if the Senji he knew had withdrawn into a shell. Naruto needn't have worried about Senji's whereabouts though. He appeared in the room beside him in a flash. Senji had shrugged off his usual black clothes and also donned a white uniform, very similar to Naruto's. Senji had explained that he had his own reputation as Senji the Dark Blade, but that he didn't want to go against the new look of their village. He had sounded very proud when he used the words, our village. Naruto couldn't help but smile. Inasmuch Senji's clothes were now white, the style was much different from Naruto's. Senji wore what could pass as a monk's coat, except slim-fitting. It was open to reveal a suit underneath, also all white. Not just any suit, but what Naruto would swear was a formal suit. Button-down shirt, slacks, shoes not sandals. Senji looked like he was going to some formal event. Naruto stood there in shock, mouth slightly agape. Senji looked at him and laughed. Well, we are representing the village. And as your bodyguard I thought I should look the part. We're going for being remembered here. Jiraiya nodded. He's right. In fact, this mission has no financial reward. Senji almost fainted. You mean this will be a freebie? He looked angrily between Tenchi and Jiraiya. I've worked years just to build up a reputation where I don't have to do freebies anymore. And now you want me to do it again? Jiraiya nodded with a smile. Yes. You may have a reputation, but Tengaku does not. He turned to Naruto. You will go to the city of Evora, which lies south of here in the plains of the unnamed country. Naruto, your clones have proven to be very useful. I've drawn a map of where the wind streams we've charted head. One passes a few miles west of Evora. Naruto nodded and looked at the map. It was at least a week's travel if they didn't use the wind stream. Unfortunately, he still hadn't found a river besides the main one to bring them back home. That meant a long trek back after they were done. Senji glanced at the map and noticed something. Hey, at least one major stream goes to each hidden village. That's an odd coincidence, isn't it? He said, half asking a question at the end. Tenchi nodded. Don't worry about that right now, Jiraiya and I are still theorizing about that. For now, just focus on your mission. Evora is a Puritan city. Its inhabitants believe in righteousness and a higher power. Because of this, any chi user or Kekai Genkai, for example, is considered a demon or devil. Jiraiya continued. They routinely hold unsuspecting visitors to their city, and spend hours interrogating them to see if they are indeed demons. This questioning is nothing more than torture designed to make people admit to anything, true or false. Sometimes they also raid nearby towns looking for demons to sacrifice to their god. They burn them at the stake. Naruto looked sick to his stomach. That people could be that cruel. So, Senji asked. He too looked a little pale. We rescue any captives? Jiraiya nodded. He then looked at Naruto. I want you to figure out a way to stop them from continuing this madness. If you can do it without destroying the city, then great. But if you must, use that wind blast you used on Sarakiel. Senji glanced nervously at Naruto for a split second before Jiraiya continued. And Naruto, if you can do it without going, well, all foxy on us, that would be best. We're trying to get people behind us, not afraid of us. Naruto nodded, but he could already feel a lot of emotion inside him. Without a word, he and Senji flashed out the entrance and towards the wind stream that would take them on their mission. Jiraiya watched them go, a thoughtful frown on his face. Tenchi thought he could tell what he was thinking without having the gift of reading minds. They'll be safe. Senji is a strong warrior and he looks up to Naruto. They will protect each other. Jiraiya shook his head. No. I'm sure they'll be fine. I'm worried Naruto will go overboard and hurt someone he doesn't mean to. I don't think he's ready for that sort of guilt yet. Tenchi looked out the doorway, now also deep in thought. Naruto and Senji leapt into the stream. Naruto's clones had put a clear marker by the stream so it was easy to find. The familiar yet still odd sensation of flying overtook them. Naruto went headfirst this time, arms at his sides, bow staff strapped to his back, enjoying the feel of wind around his body, the weightlessness. Senji folded his arms and assumed a lotus position. His body language was very easy to read, very much not pleased with this mode of transportation. They sped across the morning sky, high enough that someone on the ground could not see them if they looked up unless they had a Sharingan or Byakugan, and then only as a dot traveling impossibly fast. The wind whipped around them, making conversation difficult. This was one of the faster streams that Naruto's clones had discovered so far. Within 30 minutes they neared the point at which they needed to leave the stream. Naruto glanced at Senji who nodded at him. Senji unfolded and grabbed onto Naruto's legs with one hand, essentially moving his body out of the way. Naruto faced back to where they had come from, and unleashed a palm thrust of chakra and wind. It was as powerful as he had used back in training to cancel Senji's blade slices. It was strong enough here to temporarily disrupt the stream and let them fall out of it. They had discussed this many times, how to get out of the stream. So Naruto was glad to see it work. However, the falling to the ground part he was not looking forward to. Jiraiya had said this method should work. Should work, Naruto thought. But if it doesn't, we'll be pancakes. Senji seemed to have complete faith in Naruto as he shifted his body in mid-fall to be behind Naruto. Naruto faced the ground that was rushing up to them, and did the same move, but this time pumping a bit more chakra into it. The ground exploded just as they were about 20 feet above it. The concussive blast of the force acted as a cushion and actually pushed them back up slightly. Naruto and Senji used the push to flip and arc over the blast area, landing on their feet with a solid thump. Senji immediately fell to his knees. "Thank the great Kami that worked," he exclaimed. Apparently his trust in Naruto was not 100% absolute. Naruto grinned. "I knew it would." Senji scoffed. "Yeah, right." He looked back to where they almost landed. "Hey, look at that." Naruto turned and looked at what Senji was pointing at. As the dust settled, 2 huge handprints were embedded in the ground where they would have landed. Senji's face split into a smile. "Well, you've already left your mark on this area, Naruto." He walked off towards the village laughing. Tsunade scowled as she looked at the ravine in front of her. Her patience had worn exceedingly thin. Walking miles and miles, even with the help of her slug summons, had been tiring. Of course, it was made worse with close to 200 children of different ages complaining for the entire trip. She swore, if one more snot-nosed brat asked her if they were there yet, so help her she would. "Mistress Tsunade." Sakura's voice cut into her thoughts. "What do we do from here?" Tsunade sighed and grabbed Sakura by the shoulders. With a small heave, she chucked Sakura into the ravine. She trusted Jiraiya implicitly where things like this was concerned, so it wasn't really a dangerous thing to do to Sakura. And if she got hurt, Tsunade could always fix her herself, being a medic nin and all that. Sakura shot like an arrow up the ravine and up into the clouds. Tsunade gave it a minute, then nodded to herself. Sakura had not come crashing and screaming back to earth, so she guessed it was safe. She turned to the assorted children behind her. "Okay, form a line, and come here one at a time." An hour later, Tsunade herself burst through the clouds. She had let all the children come up first before tiredly jumping into the ravine herself. As she landed on her feet with a thump, she noticed immediately that Sakura had taken control along with Shizune and organized all the children into a single group. The kids seemed in awe of where they were. Undoubtedly many of them wondered if they were really in heaven. Jiraiya came walking over to smile at Tsunade. "Glad you made it," he beamed at her, "but where did you pick up the army of dwarves?" He laughed at her frustrated growl. She half-heartedly tried to punch him, but he dodged it well. She looked around at the island. "Wow, you weren't kidding. This place is amazing." She started to walk to the land and paused. "Do you feel that?" she asked Jiraiya. He frowned. He did have a weird feeling every time he was in Tengaku, but never bothered with it. He didn't like heights after all. Tsunade closed her eyes and breathed in deep. The crisp air felt cold against her lungs, then she felt it again. "Chakra," she said. She opened her eyes and looked around. "You said this is where all the wind of the world starts and comes back to. The air here is thick with natural energy." Tsunade kept walking. She herself never wanted to master the sage arts, she much preferred the science of medicine. But that didn't mean that as a Sannin she couldn't feel natural energy around her. Jiraiya cursed himself for not noticing sooner. He was a sage, but never achieved perfect control. He really hadn't stopped to feel that energy around him, but now that Tsunade pointed it out, he couldn't help but feel it all around, invading his very pores. He cursed verbally now. "Shit." Tsunade turned to look at him, her eyes coming off the village area under construction. "What?" Jiraiya shook his head. "Naruto has begun to feel the natural energy too." Tsunade frowned. "He's had no training, how could that be?" "He's a wind affinity," Jiraiya shrugged. "I guess as the wind here is laced with energy he is starting to become sensitive to it. The problem here is that this much natural energy is dangerous, he hasn't had any training. I had already decided to talk to Pa Toad, but I think I better do it now. When Naruto comes back, he needs to start sage training." Tsunade nodded. She stopped walking in front the tower under construction, impressed in spite of herself. It was looking massive and impressive, the third floor under construction and the white stones glimmering in the sunlight. "Okay, where do I unseal this damn orphanage?" she asked, reaching behind her and pulling out a sealing box. That box had cost her a pretty penny, but it did manage to hold a building for 200 orphans. How did he manage it? Ino asked Shikamaru. News had spread fast of the murder of the two village elders. The ANBU and Root were both hunting Kakashi actively, so he had gone into hiding. Fortunately, enough Jounin were on the side of Naturo's army that hiding wasn't proving too difficult, yet. "I'm not sure," Shikamaru replied. The coroner had declared both elders were killed by a lightning hand strike through their chests. In other words, by Kakashi's signature move, the Chidori. Since no one else in Konoha could execute that attack, except Sasuke, who was definitely not in Konoha, that left only one suspect. However he did it, there's no doubt Danzo is making the most of it. A state of emergency had been declared in Konoha, temporarily suspending the powers of the council. This effectively left Danzo as Hokage until the suspension was lifted. It was a brilliant strategy, Shikamaru had to admit, one he hadn't planned for. The other Konoha genin sat semi-dejectedly around the room. The Jounins were all out searching for Kakashi, so the original Naruto's army was meeting without them. It's illogical to continue analyzing. We don't have enough data. All we can do is look ahead, Shino said. Lee nodded. He was a man of action, all this thinking aggravated him. We need to get rid of Danzo, Lee said animatedly. Shikamaru nodded. Yes, but we're all genin. We need to get much stronger if we're to have any chance against ANBU or Root. He looked at the assembled ninja. When I look at us, you know what I see. I see the future of Konoha. I see the potential for greatness. Every man and woman in this room could be the best ninja Konoha has ever seen. We need to refocus our strategies. Shikamaru got up and began to pace the floor. Someone needs to infiltrate Danzo's office. That someone needs to earn his trust so we can have access to his plans. A spy, Kiba exclaimed. Shikamaru had a look of disgust on his face. SHH. That rules you out, Kiba. You're about as subtle as a rock to the face. A snicker from Niji and Lee. Shikamaru looked at each of their faces, studying them carefully. Why not Yushika? Ino asked. Shikamaru shook his head. No, he'd be suspicious of me from the start. The Hokage has access to aptitude tests and I score very high. He'd be wary of me. No, we need someone he'd never suspect, but that he could find useful. He pointed at Ino. You Ino. Ah. She exclaimed. Me. Why? Your family abilities could be very useful to the Hokage's office. And you're a girl. Men typically underestimate women. Shika looked at everyone else. The rest of us have our own mission. We need to train. We need to get stronger. But don't let anyone know how strong we're getting. Shino nodded. That is sound logic. No one will see genin as a threat. And if we increase our abilities up to Chunin or even Jounin level, we'd have the tactical advantage. Shikamaru smiled. Yes, exactly. We don't know as yet what Danzo is planning, but we will. And we will be ready. Danzo chuckled. The latest report said that Kakashi still hadn't been found. That was good news as far as he was concerned. As long as Kakashi was out there, he was the perfect scapegoat. After all, who else could possibly learn the Chidori? He laughed out loud in the silence of his office, the Sharingan hidden behind the bandages on the left side of his face spinning madly. Naruto and Senji stared down at the village below them. From their vantage point on a hill outside of town, it was an impressive sight. This was like no village they had ever seen before. The buildings were huge and numerous, the town was easily twice as large as Konoha was. In the very center was a cathedral that towered above the other buildings, its bell towers reaching up like dark spires into the sky. Naruto shuddered, this place had a bad feeling to it. Okay, so how do we find the captives? Senji asked Naruto, not taking his eyes off the village. He didn't want anyone to take them by surprise. Not far from them were 2 guards on the west entrance to the village. Naruto scratched his head. Well, I guess the easiest thing to do is ask. Senji turned to look at him puzzled. But Naruto had tossed his bow staff to Senji and then Hiraition to right in front the guards. What the? One of the guards almost fell back on his ass. The other lowered his spear to point it at Naruto. Excuse me, Naruto asked innocently. Where do you hold chakra users like me? The guard who had almost fallen down threw a net over Naruto and they both pointed their spears at him. Ha! Cut you now, demon. Naruto bowed his head but looked back to where Senji was, hidden out of sight. Senji cursed until he caught sight of Naruto's smile. Damn that fool, he wanted to get caught so they would take him to the others. Senji muttered to himself about the recklessness of his friend, and decided to follow the captive Naruto as the guards marched him into the city at the point of their spears. He followed them jumping on rooftops, flash-stepping as fast as he could from chimney to chimney, trying to stay out of sight. He watched as they pushed Naruto and tripped him, making him fall to the cobblestone floor. They laughed and Senji had to try hard not to cut them to pieces where they stood. They led him straight into an ominous-looking building just short of the Grand Cathedral itself. With a word to the guards posted in front that building, they pushed Naruto inside and followed. Senji could no longer see what was happening. He sat down on the roof he was perched on and decided to give Naruto one day before he killed every man who was holding Naruto prisoner. Naruto smiled as the bars slammed shut behind him. The guards laughed and left without a glance backwards. They clearly underestimated him, Naruto thought. He looked around his new accommodation. A small 8x8 cell, it looked like stone floors and iron bars. Naruto could feel other eyes on him. In the cell next to him in the very darkest of shadows, he saw 2 feet sticking out. Hello? Naruto asked of the darkness. Who's there? I've come to rescue you. Ha ha ha. A young male voice came from the shadows. Some rescue attempt. There was a scraping noise and a figure emerged. It was a teenage boy, maybe 17 years old. He was the oddest-looking boy Naruto had ever seen. For one thing, his skin was as black as his hair. His hair was thick and curly, in finger-length bunches. His clothes were frayed, in a brown tunic and beige slacks with a rope belt. He approached the bars and put his hands on them. So how exactly did you plan to rescue us? The boy glanced at Naruto's white clothing and snickered. I'll assume you are a magic user like the rest of us. But have you tried channeling since you entered the city? Naruto shrugged and did the hand seal for a shadow clone, just as he'd done thousands of times before. This time, however, it felt like a weight was resting on him, like a giant sponge had just hit him in the chest. Nothing happened. No smoke, no shadow clone. Nothing. The boy nodded. See. The entire city is shrouded by a magic dampener. None of our techniques work. Naruto saw that there were more cells in the darkness, and each had one or several people in them. His eyes were getting used to the darkness. Men, women, children. All kinds were sitting or standing in their cells. The same look of hopelessness on all their faces. He clenched his fists in anger, the inhumanity getting to him. He sat down and tried to think of a way out of this without chakra. Senji woke up on the same rooftop he had been keeping watch. He yawned and scratched his neck. Tiled rooftop was not the most comfortable place in the world to fall asleep. He heard some guards talking about the demon cleansing ritual they would be holding today. Them damn demons will be sent back to hell. One clearly enlightened and educated man exclaimed. That's right. The next chimed in. The cleansing fire will send them back to the damnation from whence they came. Amen, brother. Sister Agnes assured me that I would get to light at least one pillar myself. You're kidding. What an honor. What did you have to do to gain such privilege? My cousin from the land of snow brought the new parts for the demon suppressor. I helped arrange it. The man said proudly. Senji's head cocked to the side. This demon suppressor sounded interesting. He'd need to do some investigating into it. He hoped Naruto was doing okay. I hope Senji is doing okay, Naruto sighed. All his attempts to blow his way out of the cell failed miserably. He couldn't mold chakra at all. He tried kicking at the bars, but without chakra enhancing his attacks, his body wasn't strong enough to do any damage at all. So Naruto had sat down and put his mental capacity to work at getting out of this situation. When he had surrendered, he had just wanted to find the prisoners. Well, he had found them, but he hadn't expected to be helpless. It was a weird sensation. He looked across at the dark-skinned teenage boy across in the next cell. "Hey you," he ventured. "What's your name?" The boy looked across at Naruto, his black eyes stark even in the dim light. "I'm Nagi Mikihara." "What's your name, kid?" "Naruto Uzumaki," he replied. "Where are you from, Nagi?" "I've never met someone who looks like you," Naruto stated bluntly. Nagi looked intently at Naruto. "Are you afraid of me, Naruto? Does my color frighten you?" Naruto scratched the back of his head. "Well, not really. I mean, my friend Lee becomes red sometimes when he fights. That seems much scarier than you are right now. Especially with the way Lee fights." Nagi stared incredulously at Naruto. Years of hatred and persecution, and he'd never met someone who had brushed aside his complexion so easily. I don't know where I'm from. I was raised by my adoptive parents in a village far from here, but decided to find my own way as soon as I could," Nagi replied earnestly. Naruto smiled at him. "Well, if you want, when we get out of here, you can come and be a part of my village." He lifted his voice for all the prisoners to hear. "That goes for everyone. All are welcome in Tengaku." This was greeted by some murmuring. Nagi snapped at Naruto angrily. "Stop saying foolishness like that. There is no rescue, there is no after here. We're going to be executed today and there's no escape from that fact." His face became sad. "Sorry, kid. There's just no way out." "Psst, Naruto," Senji's whispered voice almost echoed in the dungeon. "You ready to make a move yet? I'm getting bored out here." Naruto looked up startled. Senji's voice came from a small opening to let some light in the cells. "Senji, I can't mold any chakra. None at all. So I'm stuck for now," Naruto replied. "Oh." Senji exclaimed knowingly. "Now it makes sense. Okay, I'll take care of that. You just be ready to make your move." With that, Senji melted back into the street and took once again to the rooftops. He just needed to find someone who could show him where the demon suppressor was. Piece of cake. Naruto turned to the shocked Nagi. "Offer is still open, think about it after." 30 minutes later. Naruto, Nagi, and a 5-member family of magic users were tied to wooden posts inside the huge cathedral. People were still filing in, anxious apparently to witness the cleansing. "Your friend hasn't come through as yet," Nagi said, semi-panicked. Naruto assumed that anyone would be tied to a stake and about to be burned alive. He, however, felt fairly calm. He trusted Senji. "He will. Believe it." Nagi stared incredulously at Naruto again. He hoped he wasn't this cheerily optimistic all the time. The high priest and his attendants marched in behind the stakes. "Brothers and sisters of the eternal flame, tonight we have come to witness once again the ritual that gives us everlasting life. The ritual that lifts up our spirits and brings us closer to our Lord Seti." He held up a large bronze staff with curling snakes on it. Naruto shuddered involuntarily as he thought of Orochimaru. "These demons have confessed to me privately that they came here looking for souls to devour and turn against our Lord Seti." There were audible gasps from the crowd, along with cries of "No" and "Burn them." Naruto moved to speak, but a guard stepped forward and clubbed him in the stomach with the back of his spear. Naruto spit out blood and doubled over as far as the binding ropes would let him. "Any time now, Senji," he whispered under his breath. It took just 1 second. Over the sound of the crowd laughing and Naruto being hit, he heard a familiar whistle. The noise Naruto had come to know was the slash of Senji's blade. Naruto stayed perfectly still as the air ripple sliced into the ropes all around him. Senji appeared in the door to the cathedral. "I'm still looking, Naruto." You do what you can here until I can find it, okay? Senji called out before disappearing. Naruto nodded and took a fighting stance. He may not be able to mold chakra right now, but he was still a ninja, and damn it if he was going to show these baka his taijutsu. Naruto, release me, I can help. Nagi said urgently. Naruto grabbed a spear from a still-in-shock guard and sliced the ropes holding Nagi. The head priest now snapped out of his own shock. Guards! Call the defenders of Seti. Everyone! The demons are free! Many in the gathering of people screamed and made a run for the door. Some surged forward though, to recapture the demons. Naruto jumped and whirlwind kicked the first guard in the face, sending him reeling back into the arms of his colleague. Naruto landed crouched, spinning again and swiping the catching guard off his feet. He glanced over to see what Nagi was doing and paused for a second to stare in wonder. Nagi was dancing. There was no other way for Naruto to describe it. Nagi stepped left, then right, his back leg sweeping behind him, to some unheard rhythm in his head. As a guard approached, Nagi bent at the waist and touched his palm to the floor, bringing the back leg up in an incredibly swift kick. He sent the guard flying. Nagi spun around and was back in the dance, staring down the other guards, trying to decide who to attack next. Naruto took the decision out of their hands and lunged at them. Senji slapped the man across the face again. Where is it? The next time I ask won't be pretty. The guard laughed and spat at Senji. Senji smiled and in a blink of an eye, severed the man's left hand. As he lay screaming, Senji resheathed his sword. Are you going to make me ask again? A man can live with one hand, but none. Why, you wouldn't even make a proper beggar now, would you? Naruto managed to untie the other family in the melee. They however chose to try to escape instead of staying to help. Naruto was glad they did. The father didn't seem like much of a fighter, and Naruto didn't need to see any new orphans get created today. Nagi was holding his own for now, his dancing martial arts impressing Naruto whenever he had a chance to see it. There were many more guards than Naruto anticipated, however, hundreds poured into the cathedral. Naruto had to admit even he couldn't hold them off for much longer. He spun around and backhanded a guard across his face. He flipped backwards over a lunging spear. No, not long at all. Senji stared at the metal box under the bell in the cathedral bell tower. He scratched his head. How do I turn this off? He shrugged and bent at the knees. Seconds later his sword sliced right through the machine where the words "prototype, property of Dodo Kazahana. Please return if found" were printed. Naruto felt it, the surge of power coming back to him. It was as if someone had turned on a light switch. He took a breath and made 100 shadow clones. They all smiled at the stunned guards, then surged forward. Naruto glanced across at Nagi, who should have also gotten access to his chakra back. It was an amazing sight. Nagi spun and kicked the nearest guard. But his kick ended with him melting into the shadows on the ground. He emerged from another shadow to do a somersault kick and landed, once again disappearing completely into the shadows on the ground. Naruto had never seen anything like it. He knew Shikamaru could control his shadow, but this was something else. It was as if Nagi was a shadow. The high priest shouted once again. Kill them. Kill the demons. The guards surged forward with spears and swords and crossbows. Naruto gathered his chakra and pushed. His practice paying off immensely as a huge chunk of guards were flung backwards. He was thrown forward as a blast of fire hit him from behind. He could feel his scorched skin burn and sizzle, even as the Kyubi chakra worked to heal him. He turned to see the high priest pointing his staff at Nagi. Burn demon, he shouted. Feel the miracle of Seti. Another long flame of fire burst from the staff. Nagi, however, melted into the shadows. Naruto grew angry. That was no miracle, that was chakra. You. Naruto raged at the man. You can use chakra. Why? Why are you killing people like you? The man snarled at him. I am nothing like you. I serve the Lord Seti. He gives me the power to serve his will. He leveled the staff at Naruto and blasted at him. A ball of energy exploding the ground where Naruto was a second ago. Naruto Hiraishined to the last place he saw Nagi disappear. Nagi, if you're here still, get out of the village now. Naruto's voice was steely. Get some distance away, I have something to finish here. The shadow to Naruto's left shifted slightly, then seemed to melt through the rock wall. Naruto turned back his full attention to the high priest, a little too late though, as the man hit him under the chin with the staff, sending him up into the air. He then blasted Naruto with an energy ball, cackling madly as he did it. Naruto was sent crashing through the ceiling of the cathedral and flying straight up into the evening sky. He could once again feel his skin start to heal even as he headed up into the sky. As he reached the peak of his ascent, he started to gather his chakra. He could feel the wind whipping at him, and he almost felt as if it lent him some strength as well. He began to hurtle back down to earth, the village far below. He hoped Senji was clear too. Senji in fact was looking up at Naruto from the courtyard of the prison near the cathedral. He was covering for the exit of the other prisoners. They were all gone and he was just decimating guards when he looked up and saw Naruto plummeting. At first he was worried about his friend, falling from that height. Then he cursed and ran, flash stepping as fast as he could away from the center of the village. Naruto knew a way to stop his fall from that height, but it would mean he cleared the village gate just as he felt the chakra surge. Naruto had gathered an immense amount of chakra, and pushed down, using the technique he had used when they first arrived on the wind stream. The blast was immense. Huge hands of chakra flattened the stone buildings into rubble, dust erupting all around. The cackling of the high priest drowned out by the tumultuous destruction of the city. Like before, the blast created a cushion for Naruto to bounce off of, and flip to safety outside the blast area. It was still a long fall, but he channeled some chakra to his legs to help him land without breaking them. It left a small impact crater where he landed. The dust was still pluming into the evening sky when Senji found Naruto. He was staring at the imprints in the landscape from a nearby hilltop. Two giant hands embedded in the ground, where the village had once stood. Nothing left but a few stone walls on the outskirts and a sign on a road that read, "Sinners and Demons Beware." Nagi materialized out of a nearby shadow and whistled. He looked from the destruction to Naruto. "So, where exactly is this village of yours?" Naruto, Nagi, and Senji trudged along the dirt road. Once again Naruto wished they could find a wind stream to take them home. They were a week, maybe more, away from Tengaku on foot. Senji had immediately bonded with Nagi. They were all warriors at heart, so finding something in common was easy. "I hate walking," Senji grumbled. His face lit up. "Hey Naruto, how about we toss you into the air and see if we can't find a wind stream back home?" Nagi grinned too, an evil light in his eyes. Naruto stepped backwards, they wouldn't. Nagi disappeared into the ground and Senji lunged forward in a flash step. Naruto began to Hiraishin away, laughing at the play, when two hands shot out of the shadow on the ground and held his ankles. Before he knew it, he was laying across the outstretched and interlocked arms of Nagi and Senji. "Wait guys, I'm not sure." 3, the two teenagers shouted, bypassing both numbers 1 and 2. They shot Naruto far into the air. He waved his arms futilely, "No stream up here," and began to plummet to earth. He was going to use his chakra push to brace his fall, but then he realized his friends were below him. He swung his legs below and pumped chakra into them, hoping to cushion as much of the landing as he could. Just before he hit the ground, a large hand reached between Nagi and Senji and grabbed Naruto by the back of his shirt, keeping him from hitting the ground. They swiftly looked at the oddly dressed large man who had appeared before them, and then at the large wagon rolling into the meadow behind him. "Greetings. I am." The man began to speak. Naruto finished the sentence excitedly. "The Magnificent Mabry."